Hello, and welcome back to another episode of The Poems I Love. For my second appearance on the podcast, I shall be reading Mahmoud Darwish, the Palestinian poet, against Precious Arinze, who is a Nigerian poet currently writing. I'll take Mahmoud Darwish first. The poem is titled I Belong There. I belong there. I have many memories. I was born as everyone is born. I have a mother, a house with many windows, brothers, friends, and a prison cell with a chilly window. I have a wave snatched by seagulls, a panorama of my own. I have a saturated middle. In the deep horizon of my word, I have a moon, a bird's sustenance, and an immortal olive tree. I have lived on the land long before swords turned man into prey. I belong there. When heaven mourns for a mother, I return heaven to a mother, and I cry so that a returning cloud might carry my tears. To break the rules, I have learned all the words needed for a trial by blood. I have learned and dismantled all the words in order to draw from them a single word: home. The second poem by Precious Arinze is titled Inheritance. The poem is published on A Long House. Here it goes. None of it belonged to me. The farmlands ransacked by generations of ants. The years of raw tubers sliced thin and eaten. The tree my father broke his back trying to climb, 12 years younger than the age I am now. Reddish brown of village roads, the color of papyrus roots. The village slowly burning. The sound of monkeys fleeing trembling branches to weep in the river. Metal carcass of abandoned vehicles eaten away by rust. The gardens uprooted to make room for the dead. The barren months with no news of those waiting to return. Those who will never again. Not even their names. Not even the mouth left unable to gather them. Someone swore that their need to be with us was greater than our need to be by ourselves. Then houses filled with ghosts. And the next day, history took on a new meaning. So did home. So did country. The first time I went home, my cousins said I am only Igbo because my mother tells me so. They meant I could not live in one place and dare to belong somewhere else. This ungentle hazing, this apocryphal separation is the wound I am made of. Jagged language in which I can speak of home but not how to get there. I killed a snake once out of fear for my own safety. It was a taboo to do so. My aunties made me mourn it like it was my child, like it was something that had come out of me, and maybe it's hard. Home, too, is a snake. It comes hissing through the incalculable distance. That entire trip, I spent the afternoons living in a tree, peeling the skins of tangerines, careful to leave the fruit unharmed. When I closed my eyes, there was so much darkness. I couldn't see the end of it or separate what was there before and what was only just arriving. How much of the hooded shadow belonged to me. It is quite refreshing to have this poem read. Reason because these poets hold a special place in my heart, and their writings in particular have also been very resourceful to me. That said, I equally find this issue, discussed, in the poems fascinating. Um, Over time, the issue of inheritance has always been a popular discourse in literary spaces, especially among writers of African descent. And we see how these poets, address this issue, you know, from different generations. We could see from Mahmoud Darwish how, people of his generation and people from his country and who lived at the time that he also lived, in that region, perceive the idea of inheritance. Likewise, in the case of Precious Arinze, we could also see, how people from their part of the world, which is definitely the southeastern Nigeria, and people of their generation, perceive the themselves as belonging to something or somewhere or even to themselves. Um, so one thing that is remarkable and that these two poets agree on regarding the issue of belonging is how much physical presence, or what I could otherwise call bodily presence, determines determines or helps to measure the level of belonging. I could imagine you not being a part of a place, even though you're not in a place physically, oh, I'm not here physically, or I'm out of that space. Can we? Okay, I think this poems helps us to address the question about the question of if physical or bodily presence helps to determine belonging. And to answer this question can be quite touching and emotional, especially when we consider the reality, the present realities where people have had to leave, their country in search of, greener pastures, and then we are forced to ask, even though they have left, bodily, physically, these people still, mentally, emotionally, and even spiritually are connected to their homes. How then do we determine their belonging? Which is one of the questions that these poets, try to raise. And another thing that these poets also agree on is they really are ready to be submitted to, their status quo, which means that they really they feel there is this sense of detachment from their place of birth, the place in which they are born, they are raised, they're taught to learn, they're taught to live, to love, and then these places have now become, unbearable for them, as in the case with Mahmoud Darwish, where in his poem he tried to highlight some of those things that are the events that are taking place, in his place of birth. There is the issue of the occupation, death, ethnic cleansing, civil war, and it's so funny that even after years, these things still go, on. They still continue, and you could actually see the reason why he feels so detached to it. But in spite of the detachment that this poet, share, we can also see that a part of home still lives within them, and we could see the element of totemism where they highlight, these things that makes them feel connected to home. In the case of Mahmoud, we could see him talk about the waves, we see him talk about the meadow, we see him talk about the moon, olive tree, and then with Precious Arinze, she also shares a similar, sensation, or should I say, um, a similar bias, with the concept of the snake, which is something, that shows attachment to a place of birth. Yeah. So I think besides that, we could also see how these poets are trying to paint an order, in these poems. They make us believe that there is an order, and we could see that this is what they try to establish at the initial of their poems. We could see Mahmoud Darwish in the first few lines of the poem trying to say, you know, there's an order being burned, then having a mother, then having a house, having a brother, friends, and then we could see the twist, then a prison cell, then all of it's receding into memory, which is what, institutionalized or systematic violence has done, to him, takes everything that's, that is ease, that is given either by birth or by familial relation. Everything is taken away from him, and then he begins to doubt his belonging, because contrary to what people might believe, the idea of belonging is not an individualistic thing. You belong to something, or something makes you a part of it, and that is how the idea of belonging is created. So we could also see in the case of Precious Arinze's poem Inheritance, where she's trying to create an order. She's painting an order that existed, prior what we could call, um, 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 the civil war or the Biafran genocide. You could see the farmlands ransacked by generations of hand, slicing of raw tubers, climbing of trees, the village roads that are reddish brown, fleeing monkeys. All of these things are, these images try to create an order, and there is also a sense of there is a homogeneity, of existence in these places, but before an intrusion, and then once this intrusion happens, this order is displaced, and then these poets are equally displaced, whether mentally, emotionally, and even physically, because they had to live to be safe, and then that sense of belonging is somehow lost. And I think amidst all of this detachment, attachment, trying to establish their place, within a cultural space or cultural or social context, we can also see that these poets are actually defiant, that even regardless of their absence, bodily or physical absence, some way, somehow, this order, this place of their birth is still, a part of them. It still belongs to them. It's still their inheritance, and no amount of, um, um, distance could bridge their connection to these spaces. And I think this argument reminds of an editorial notes of Alal If You Hear Me, a poetry anthology edited by Fatima Asghar, Safia El Ilo, the Sudanese American poet, and then some others. And they also talked, in that note, Safia El Ilo talked about religion as an inheritance, and she was trying to talk about her experience as not the idea of the good Muslim, bad Muslim, where praying, for example, in Islam, is is one of the ways you establish your Muslimness. And when you don't practice this, or you don't observe your salat, you are bound to feel that you are not Muslim enough, or you are even judged that you are not Muslim, enough, And then she goes on to say that that is not what makes, just because there is an expectation of you to be part of, a structure, and then because you don't conform to that, structure, should not being able to conform, consistently to the requirements of that structure shouldn't make you feel less of being a part of that, structure. And I think this is what these poets try to, remind us, to highlight, all of these, events leading to their detachments, and how they've been judged as being displaced from what connects them to these places. They still feel some way, somehow, through certain tools or aids, they still feel connected, to these structures. And I think that on my reading of Mahmoud, Darwish, I Belong There, and Precious Arinze's Inheritance. Thank you for listening. I hope you tune in for another appearance of mine on the podcast, The Poems I Love. Thank you.